The one thing that really gives away teams being coached really well is,
generally speaking, there's two tricks I can use, and people might like these.
What stats are you specifically focused on? You're a defense coach. As a defense coach, would you be interested in?
And I always want to know one thing. I go, what stats do you think are important?
Welcome to this very special episode of the Lekker Rugby Pod, where Harry Jones and André Pretorius join forces for the first time for a nice in-depth technical rugby discussion, the likes of which you've never seen. This podcast is in two parts. The first one is a discussion about how Harry, as a rugby expert, André as an ex-Springbok and current coach in Japan, and myself as a simple armchair enthusiast, like to watch games. What do we look for? What do we analyze? What do we prefer? And the second part, which we'll publish a bit later, is a discussion of the current state of affairs with the big three South African teams, the Stormers, the Sharks, and the Bulls. Harry did a series of videos earlier this year where he discussed each of these teams, what they're doing wrong, what they're doing right, and what they can do to fix things going forward. And him and Andre are going to have a nice in-depth discussion about whether these fixes are realistic, what can work, what can't work, what Andre's opinion is. So make sure you don't miss it. But before we get to that, just a bit of an update of what we're doing on this channel. As you know, last year, Andre and I switched over from Afrikaans to English, and that was the last Afrikaans content on this channel. And that was for a specific reason. Like I mentioned to some of you in the comments, we have a plan for Afrikaans, and what we've done is we've established a separate Afrikaans channel for rugby. It's called Rugby, and the link to it is in the pinned comment down below. Please go there, click on the link and subscribe to that channel so that we can grow the Afrikaans side of it as well. And very simply put, the reason why we're doing it is simply because our international audience is now far bigger than our South African audience, but I still wanted to continue doing Afrikaans. But if we do Afrikaans on an English channel only, it confuses the algorithm and the channel suffers as a result. So the answer is to have a dedicated Afrikaans channel, a dedicated English channel. And like I said, the link is down in the pinned comment below. Make sure you go there, make sure you subscribe, and also while you're at it, make sure you subscribe to the MEGAFOON Sport channel. This one you're watching the Lekker Rugby Pod on. So without any further ado, let's get back to Harry and Andre for this in-depth rugby discussion. So Harry, let's start with you. You wanted to talk about how you guys, you as a rugby expert or avid follower, Andre is an ex-Springbok rugby player, coach currently in Japan, and myself is just an armchair rugby lover. How we watch and how we analyze games and follow games and the like. So I wanted to expand on that a bit. Andre, we'll get to you just now. How do you do it, Harry?
Yeah, no, it's great to join Andre on here. I was talking to some guys a year ago about mall defense up in Seattle in MLR. Because I was working with one club to build a mall, and I worked with the other club to defend the mall. It was Machiavellian. And the kickers, they always are by their side. They got to do extra kicks. And they were all bitching about the tees because they're too high. And you have to have an unnatural strike. And so I talked to them about the Andre. And I said, well, did you ever see any footage of the Andre? The man who built the kicking Kilimanjaro. It was ornate. I mean, he had special sand. He had a different way of sweeping the sand together, and we make this beautiful funnel shaped for the ball to go over. And they all fell in love with this idea. Now they're debating about which sand works best. So I'm really happy to be on with you, Andre. I actually think that's a real thing, by the way. Envy and I've talked to the kicking expert, Rocketfoot, and he talks about the tee being a little bit unnaturally high. But that's a topic for another day. Now, Envy, I like to go to the games, as you know. Went to 8 tests last year. Way back in 2024, and then I went to 2 extra ones at the Stoop, and I like being there. And unlike some of the paid pundits who are on a salary, even though I'm paid to do this, I want to be in the cheap seats, and I want to be sometimes down low, and I want to be up high, and I want to be with the people singing, crying, drinking the brandy, and opining. I love to hear opinions. I love to hear it all around me. I love to when someone goes into that first face ruck, I love to hear that. Help him. I like to hear that because there's a wisdom in crowds. But I like all of it. I like the practice, I like the pre-match. If you ever gone to the horse races and you're going to bet a bundle on a trifecta, you're going to go to the training ground, the paddock, and look at the horses and how they interact with their jockey and how nice the trainer is. You want to see it all. At the Bledisloe, seeing Joe Schmidt work on his carry clean. And back in the day when the All Blacks were on top, I loved how loose they were before the game. You cannot see that on TV. Bowden Barrett betting with his brother on a drop kick bounce, hitting the pole, $50, Meanwhile, over there, the Boks were drilling themselves to death on things they'll never do in the game. And then now it's flipped around. You got Rassie walking around, vibing, staring down people. You got everyone doing funny, games in the scrums, Don Humont actually packing down. So I think you can tell a lot from being there before the game and then also right afterwards when you're with someone who's been there, like Greg Laidlaw, the the Scottish number 9, in Marseille, the two of us having coffee the next morning. And he said, we didn't have enough quick ball. You killed us. And I said, how would you have gotten it? He said, we had to kick more. That's counterintuitive. Everyone else was like, we got to build more phases. No, Finn fell right into the trap of playing too much rugby. So I will always force myself to go to inconvenient places and watch rugby, but it's different depending on when I'm watching, live for a team I love. So quarterfinal in 2011 for the Boks in the rain at Twickenham, dying, tragic. 2000, in the Cape Town in Wellington, and then 2015 Twickers. And then the glory of the quarterfinal, semifinal, final run in France. Any game that involves Western Province or Stormers, I have no objectivity. I just go through all the emotions. But then if I want to watch something and analyze it, let's say I'm watching New Zealand versus Ireland in Dublin, I try to pick things. And Andre, I don't know about you, but I like to watch for early clues to ascendancy. But rugby is a complicated game, so how many carries is it taking you to make a break? How many phases are maintainable? I look for early clues about, how many spilled balls there are, who's getting the scrappy ball, trying to watch the momentum. I don't know what you look for, but depends on how engaged I am in the game and how I'm just sort of analyzing it.
Yeah, Harry, firstly, it's great to be on the pod with you. And interesting story about the Andre. I'll never forget the first time a kid came and asked me to do the eye in Cresta shopping mall. And I didn't have a clue what it was. And I'd begun just looking at the bottom of the posts to square up the whole alignment. And apparently it became something. I think Hugh Bladen had more to do with that than me, the way he spoke about it. And so it's a privilege to be on here with you. And then just to get to how I watch rugby, it's quite a difficult one for me because it's difficult for me to watch as a supporter, especially when the Lions are playing. I prefer when the Lions play to just watch at home and to be part of that. Although I like going to the rugby, the impartial games is, I don't mind sitting between the supporters, upstairs, downstairs, doesn't matter. Getting wind of what they do for the warm up, exactly what you just said. You go through the whole experience, and I've met a lot of people where they go to rugby and you get a seat next to them and they start chatting to you, and you give them some insight into what happens on game day and where they are now and what happens from there, and it just totally changes the experience for those people. And I've really made an effort that when I do go to a game and someone does tend to engage, to make that experience quite special and get them the best type of insight that I can. Then watching the game itself, it's what I normally look for is what I'm coaching at the moment. So when I was coaching attack, I would look for, are they seeing where the doors are, or are they running into walls? So because a lot of times the shape is set, guys are going through training rituals in the game because that's what they do in training, and they're not heads up, not looking up, blinds on, tip passes are on, but they, just running into double hits. So I'm really interested to see, are they picking the right side to play? Are they playing into the small seams that is presented? And then the breakdown. I think if you're looking for ascendancy, early signs of ascendancy, I call them take my breath away rucks. Every time your players go in as attackers and it takes your breath away, like, oh, we're getting the ball back, then there's a jackal threat onto every single ball. You kind of have to change your pod system, take away a couple of options, ensure that the latch is there, the connection is there. And then on the defense side of things, you can really see if a side has been, and this is more to, the school coaching. I love going to school matches, standing one side and just even from the morning, 7 o'clock, the under 14s, they take the the ice off the grass in the winter, and just seeing those players go through that experience, it brings back some nostalgia from the days that you played. And they're not playing for money. They're playing for a jersey. They're playing for their coach and their mates. So that's a great experience. But the one thing that really gives away if a team's been coached really well is if their folding system and the reloading system out of contact after tackles, because that means that the defense understands the principle of having numbers on feet. And once you see that, you tend to realize that this team has been coached really well, because not a lot of teams focus on defense. And when you get school sides that's got a folding system, a reloading system on the other side, there's a big probability of that team being successful in their competitions. But just going back to the internationals, I think watching on TV is probably best for me, as there's a lot of stop start, taking pictures with my phone. I don't want to forget that, trying to see if there's any trends that's being done by teams, new trends, etc. And then watching rugby with my daughters. They've got a lot of questions. They show a lot of interest into the game. So, that's sometimes you want to watch the game and nobody should talk, but I just love them sitting next to me asking, "What's that about? What's that about?" And that's a form of connection that you just can't pay money for that.
Yeah, it's funny, in the quarterfinal in Stade de France, I was only one in green in a section full of blue. There was another Safa guy about 10 rows down, and we're literally flying over to each other, doing high fives, hugging each other. He became my best friend, and we're like annoying to everyone around us because we're winning. But by the halftime, all those French supporters were asking us questions like, can you take a mark and do a scrum? I was like, I don't know, sure. Never saw it before, but it's good. I think conversations I've had in Dublin or in London or in Durban with people that weren't so clued into the game, and for some reason either they recognized me or someone told them and they started asking questions. I think that's part of rugby. I think that's brilliant. It's what I grew up around, these old guys that had so much wisdom and would tell you, how to move. On defense, I look for teams, especially on the ground, if you're there early, I look for loud teams that really talk to each other on defense. Right now, the All Blacks, I think it was too quiet in their setup, and not enough people were telling people on the fold. There was really no communication in between. And I look on defense systems to have not just one guy, the defensive captain, but every 3 men is someone telling someone what to do, not just putting their arm up, but actually, yelling, because in the moment it's so loud and you need clear directives. I'm really different depending on when I know I have to be analyzing. So like MVS says, you're going to be talking right after the match, then I actually start to think about key moments. But I don't think that's how I watch the game, really. Every match in rugby is a story. It's not like golf, where if you smoke the first drive, 300 down the middle, you feel like you're going to have a good day, and you kind of do usually. In rugby, you can get, under the sticks and you're watching someone score against you, and it's almost sometimes the best thing. It wakes you up, and then you beat them 32-7. So it's a long, complicated game. So many things can take away your ascendancy. So let's say you have all the greatest stats in the world, you're rolling, but I always use that rule of 5. If you lose 5 line outs, you lose 5 scrums, you have 5 line breaks against you, you have 5 knock-ons that people actually claim, regain kicks. That can swamp 100 rucks. It doesn't matter. I'll give you 100 rucks. I'll give you 100 phases, but I get 5 regained kicks behind the line. I'm taking that. So, I think it's interesting to watch. Where do you like to be in terms of relation to the field? I've sort of, on a grassroots game and a schools game, I kind of like being behind the try line. I like seeing the shape of the whole game from tram to tram.
School games for sure. Behind the posts, nice and close. You can listen to the chat there. You can see things unfold on attack and defense, and you don't have to listen to the teachers complaining about the ref on the other side of the field, which is great. But definitely behind, and then when it comes to especially schoolboy rugby, I think there's an element of kind of naivety where they
Mhm.
sometimes overestimate or underestimate themselves. And once whatever they believe kicks in, you see the other team either take over or they take them over. You know, it's like
Yeah.
you get them. They believe these guys really believe that all they need to do is just carry hard and it's going to happen. And they're against this smaller school, but the smaller school has been just moving the ball around. They've been chasing. There's not many big hits. They've been beating them on the outside. And you see this whole thing unfold where strategy is busy beating the physicality.
Yeah.
And those are the types of, and we spoke about underdog. Those are the types of games I really like to watch and to see that unfold. The winners not always the underdogs, but geez, they get a couple of punches in.
Yeah, it's so the role of calm in the storm because any rugby match is not going to only go for you. I don't care how good you are. There's always this patch where it's horrible, and I'm reminded of the calm. I was at the golf tournament one time. It was in Augusta, and I got to watch the warm ups before. And Freddie Couples, at that point, kind of old, bad back, was there, and all these young golfers were there, and they were all on the leaderboard, like within 5 strokes of the lead. I think it was the one where Charles Schwartzwell won, actually, but that's why I was there. But they had a swing coach, a psychological coach. They had a playing coach. They had a guy feeding them balls. They had little tools. They had all kinds of golf paraphernalia. Here's Freddie Couples walks up. He's got a long putter. He just hits one for fun, about 50 feet and then maybe 80 feet, talks to the state trooper and leaves. And he smoked the field that day. So there's a role of confidence that comes from the hyperactivity. You see guys early on in the schools rugbies, and they're just coming out of their skin. They're throwing up on the toilet. They're running on there. They're charging onto the field. They got war cries going, and then they 5 minutes in, they're just done. They've already done. And I will never stop going to the games. But if I have to do a real analysis, Andre, I love to do player versus player. I even did one, which is sort of sacrilege. I did one with Antoine Dupont versus Jameson Gibson Park in the Champions Cup final a year ago. And through 70 minutes, you would have said Jameson Gibson Park had the better. Just involvements. I just go involvements, every single one. And if they have any man-to-man, which is not that usual in rugby, the
Yeah.
duels don't really come down to 1 versus 1. But Jameson had them. But then the story is told, later. Not the 15 all, but I like doing that and divide the game into 10 minutes each because I want to see whether anyone has a drop off in activity. So I didn't want Movaka versus Etzebeth, which is kind of a weird matchup. And Etzebeth really needed that yellow card. I mean, it almost helped him. He came out from the yellow card, and I love taking the game in different ways, as MV knows. I think. In the end, I'm looking for some kind of mismatch or some kind of an edge. And like this weekend, there's just so many counterintuitive edges.
Ari, do you do that to make predictions, or is it to find reasons for certain events?
I think there's 3 ways that it happens. One is my own particular brain, as diseased as it is. I have an analytical brain that never stops. In every sport I ever played, I may not have been the most explosive athlete, but I would find ways to make my opponent play worse. I was really good at making you come down. And so fascinated by that idea, like whether it's in tennis with angles, whether it's golf with just, talking shit to you before you putt, or in rugby, I think there's so many other ways to bring someone down to your level. And I love a well-coached team doing that and winning ugly and winning close games. The second thing is, I developed a bit of a gig, so I get paid to turn around teams, consulting them. And a lot of times it's about the maul or the ruck. And I'm fascinated by that organism. I think it's a beautiful thing in rugby to have that many bodies in motion and make sense of it. So I love to take complicated things and make them simple. It's also what I do in my real life. of fixing things. So I'm trying to find what is the one thing, what's the juggler that can grab the juggler and squeeze you out, you know? And then the third thing is for entertainment value. So I feel like when we're doing this and we're producing content, I don't want to do the same old, like, oh, the possessions territory stats were really one way. I don't even think that. I mean, I like to think of new ways to look at things. So I'm always trying to build an analogy with a shepherd and sheepdogs, or climbing a mountain, or whatever it is, you know, making the perfect cheese. So I'm watching games in that way. And then if we have an instant reaction and I'm drunk outside Ellis Park, I just got to have something to say. So I just come up with something that I pull out of my arse.
I want to just ask both of you, sorry, Andre, you mentioned sitting behind the poles, or behind the touchline, or you want to sit close to the field. I struggle with, I like a sort of a bird's eye view of everything in life. I want to see things from the top so I can see the bigger picture and then see the detail. I struggle to see the bigger picture when I'm sitting in the stadium, especially when I'm sitting low, or when I'm sitting in the press box at Loftus. Hallelujah, they removed the windows, believe it or not. So now you can open the windows, so you can actually experience the crowd. It's a huge difference it made the first game we played there. And I wanted to ask you, Andre, specifically you, starting with you and then Harry, how do you get that bird's eye view? You say you stand behind the poles, for example. How can you see what's going on? Whenever I've sat behind the poles, I have no idea what's happening, because if the game is the other side of the field, I'm out of it. I can't follow it. So how do you do that?
I think it's more a case of then being more specific with what you're looking at and what you're looking for. Bird's eye view, you'd be able to see space opening up on both sides of the field, but it'll be difficult to see, let's say, ruck height. You won't be able to really gauge what the ball carriers are doing with their body positions, etc., etc. So from behind the posts, it's always what's really nice to see if an attacking side is doing a good job with carrying into seams, pulling in defenders, slowing up their fold, and you can actually see their corner getting more narrow, and then you're waiting for that attacking team to pull the trigger. And when they do, it's a thing of beauty coming across. And then what you then look for is, what have they got left? And how are they going to manage this and adapt to this problem? And you see all of this happen, and then you look at the attacking team, are they going to make the right decisions? Because a lot of teams create some really good opportunities, and I'm talking line breaks, having 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, etc., just last man defending, but they make bad decisions. And the flip side of that coin is, it's defensive sides that they just go for one more ruck. We're trying to do something with our team at the moment, where we just, when there's a line break, just get us one more ruck, because one more ruck will give us an opportunity to get our defense set. But we've got to get that one more ruck. And sometimes when you chase through, guys are fatigued, that they make bad decisions when they're tired, and support runners don't expect the ball because this guy's probably going to go all the way, etc., etc. So defenders keep on chasing. A lot of the times they save that event and that try because of that, and attacking teams make bad decisions when that happens. But sitting behind the post, coming back to the point, sitting behind the post, you can see these opportunities open up, and gauge if, are they taking them, are they not taking them, where's the rest of it. And also the kick space from the top is probably easier to see than from behind the post. I don't know what you think, Eric.
You get more of a view of what the player looks at. It's like when you're watching a game show on TV and you always know the answer, but it's much different if you're on the show. And so it builds an illusion when you're watching from bird's eye view. You're like, why did you not see that? You know, you had one more pass and you were away. But if you're standing behind the try line, you see that you cannot see it. That's the nature of the way the game's played. You have to be on the earth. And so you're down here and you're looking at that. And so it's, I guess, a more empathic way of looking at rugby. Second, I think I find that I see the fold, the drift, the rush, the blitz, and the umbrella closing easier when I'm on the ground and I look at the wide expanse. I think one of the first things you realize is how wide the field is, and yet how clogged up it is at the same time. if I had a perfect world, I have a reptile eye. I could have an eye on the 50 looking across and a try line. So but if I have to pick one or the other, and I'm watching as a analyst, I'm going to have to do a report for a team afterwards about what I think we can change and do better. Then I want to be behind the try line. Actually, it's weird. If I'm wanting the experience of the match and enjoy it, I prefer to be like a few meters left or right of the 50, about 10 rows up, because then you can see the angle. It's not deceiving. You can hear the lineouts, and you can sense the collisions. But I do like the look of it. I mean, I like looking at a game as a fullback. I think some of the best readers of games are fullbacks. They have to play off kick returns. They have to decide when to go, when to kick up again. They have to read the mind of the 9 and the 10 and cover kicks. So it's interesting to watch it that way. The other thing is, I think you see when there are disconnections on defense where if I take one step to my left or right, can I touch my man? And I think that's more obvious on try line. Whereas at 50, it kind of looks like a big muddle until someone breaks.
And sitting on the side of the field, like you just mentioned, you don't have reptilian eyes. So what I tend to do is I tend to lose contact with the game if it goes too far away from me. I mentioned it before when I asked the question. But then sort of what happens, you start talking to the guy next to you, and then the players come back to you and you're all excited because it's happening right in front of you, Harry. How do you manage that? You know, that because what, like you said, you're watching more technical than I am, for example.
Yeah.
I prefer watching it on TV, to be perfectly honest. I love the atmosphere, but I want to see I want to hear what the TMO says. I want to hear what the ref says.
Yeah.
What you don't get on TV, like you just said, I never get a bigger picture of, how the backlines are aligned and stuff like that. So if you're sitting next to it and the game moves away from you, how do you keep contact with the game and still high-fiving the guy 10 rows down below you?
No, I feel you, Mbia. As you probably know by now, I have whatever the opposite of ADHD is. That's what I have. I can take a lot of multiple stimuli in at one time. I can be getting the brandy behind me. I can be smacking the guy on the head in front of me. I could be flirting with this girl here. I mean, it's all happening, but I'm watching the game. I have a love affair with rugby, so it's ingrained. But I do have to watch it again on the big ones. I have to watch the game again. I have to go and I have to stop and start and stop and start. I like if I'm at the game and I'm having real trouble, like when I was at 2011 quarterfinal against Australia. We'd been drinking all day at a pub where both supporters were, and then we got into the stands. It was more Aussies, and you had that horrible thing where it's green and gold and gold and green, so it's hard to know what's going on. But there was two guys behind me that were dressed like a Grim Reaper, like the Angel of Death and the Grim Reaper were behind me in wallaby gold. To my left were some two old guys they were New Zealanders, and they were sort of neutral. And they just turned to me in the middle of the match and said, "You guys are getting screwed." And then, we were doing that thing, and is that Pat McCabe hits Jean de Villiers in the pass. It supposedly drifts forward flat-ish. Pat Lambie scores. I'm coming out of my mind, and I forced the two Grim Reapers into an involuntary hug. I pressed them to me, and I'm like, "Yeah, yes," saying some bad words to them. And then 2 seconds later, they reversed the call, right? And then they just Grim Reaping me with their, sickle. And pretty impossible to keep analytical brain going on at that point, MVA. That's just agony. And the saxophone playing Waltzing Matilda outside a hotel all night. Yeah, it didn't help. Generally speaking, there's two tricks I can use, and people might like these. One is I pick a player before the game that I know I'm going to watch, and if you just pick the blind side, just go with Courtney Laws, Peter Steph Toy, Wallace Satiti, whoever's playing for the France of that position, Argentina solicitors too. But those players are so great, Jamie Ritchie. These are really good players, on-the-ball players. For the Wallabies right now, it's Rob Valentini. You just watch their activity. They're almost always going to be where the action points are. And it allows you to keep watching a player. It's easy to find the 6 or the 7 for us anyway. And so that helps you guide you through the game. And if they're getting beat up, you're probably in trouble if it's your team. The other one is I try to sort of think about these things in rhythms. I think André does this too. The idea of attack sets and defensive sets working against each other, almost like the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean colliding, of Cape Point. And it's very interesting when you start to watch the clash on that. Not so much about exact, meters post contact, but just the idea of that gain line brutal ballet where people are smashing into each other, just watch it from that standpoint. It generally has an effect. It can be negated. I get that. A great kicking team can negate it. But generally speaking, especially at a club level, it'll usually work. So that allows me to still drink and share and have fun and talk about where you from, and still enjoy the game.
André, I wanted to ask you, you introduced us to this analytical software that you guys use as coaches, where you draw the lines and the game pauses for a second so you can just sort of adjust to it. Once you start using that as a coach now, how does that work, number one? And secondly, Harry, I want to ask you this as well, once Andre's answered this, is what statistics are you interested in as an expert sort of analyst coach thing? What are we looking at there?
That's once you start using that type of software, it normally comes with 4 or 5 angles, which is really good. It gives you the behind the poles view. It gives you that bird's eye view. It gives you opposite side of the field view especially for the scrum engages. The forwards coaches need to see, what's the ref on the free kicks and penalties that he's given. So what that also does is, especially where we are at the moment, we don't have all the time in the world with the players. Our players come in the morning. They have to be at the company at 1 o'clock. So a lot of the review stuff can't be done in person. And we also only have one translator.
Company, you mean they still have a full-time job working for a company?
That's right. But full-time meaning that a lot of the teams, send their players to work the whole day and then they have to go and train afterwards. Our players, we've got a good incentive going. They only have half day, go to work at 1, train in the morning. So a lot of the players are there for that reason, and that keeps your numbers up as well, so you can have a decent squad size.
Sorry to interrupt you. It was interesting. Yeah.
No problem. It's a big thing if you can get that right, especially in the lower divisions, Division 3 and 2, where we are now. If you've got the right incentive, you can keep your squad numbers quite high. And and I've got so much respect for the teams and the players that do it the other way around. I coached at Northern Rhinos. I consulted there for a very long time, and I had so much respect for those guys. Getting up at 2, they drop down at 2:45, come out at 4 o'clock, and then they've got this small little grey-haired midget coming up and trying to tell them what to do in after a shift. So I realized that's where I started realizing this needs to be the best day, the best part of their day. They need to want to come to training after work. If it's not going to be pleasant, it's why even do that? They don't need to rock up there. But just to get back to your point, and on the software, it just gives us an opportunity to get some review stuff done that's not in person, and we've only got one translator at the moment, so it's between me and the forwards coach. He stays rather busy, but it means that you've got to get some of your we have to get some Japanese scripture in there, so you need to teach yourself how to get that in there so the message is nice and clear. But I feel that the software has given us just an extra dimension of getting messages across and not having to do that in person.
And stats, what stats are you specifically focused on? You're a defense coach at the Red Dolphins. I remember the name for a change. So yeah, what stats as a defense coach would you be interested in?
Well, the first thing I'm really interested in is to see what's the gain line stats? Are we doing our job keeping them away from the gain line? Because there's processes that go in behind that. And, dominant hits, Harry talks about this a lot. Dominant hits is where the turnovers lie and where we want to do. So there's process behind that as well. We're a double shoulder team, a chop and top team. A guy like Rory Arnold, obviously, he's not gonna be making a lot of chops. So when Rory and Josh Fenner is defending together, there's a choke focus. Mm-hmm. So we'll have a look at collision stats. What are we doing collision wise? And is it dominant? Are we taking guys back? What's the finish like? Is it a power finish? Is it a neutral finish? Is it a roll away finish? Because from there, you can determine if your tackler can get involved in the breakdown afterwards, which means that you don't have to insert another body into that breakdown. So all of that is it's very system and process driven and measurable, which means that when you look at your stats, there's no use in just having stats. And I think, Harry, this is where it's a bit different. You know, when I'm doing stats, I need to have something that I can talk to within the coaching plan. Just having stats and making it look nice, it's just going to take your time and it's not going to transfer onto the field. So stats, it's really important that your stats talk to your plan and your coaching plan going forward. What are your fixes? Why are you measuring this? And if you get the data, what are you going to do with it? What does that look like afterwards? So the collision is really important to us because it either slows up the ball, gives us opportunity to set, which means we can be square on the next set, get off the line, and that'll just snowball in our favor. The flip side of that coin is if we don't, we never get set, we never get structured, we give away offloads, and by the end of the day, it's no use in a defending team making 40 tackles and still conceding. I'd rather defend for 4 phases and really have a go at the ball every single opportunity we get.
Harry, on your side, your stats, the attack stats,
Yeah,
whatever. You taught me about meters after contact, for example. That's quite a telling stat.
Yeah, I just realized that, the Japanese leagues, they have wonderful mascots and titles, the bright, fornicating, intoxicated goats, that kind of names. And now I think we need to have a gray-haired midgets. That's going to be the next team. I'm going to start one in Japan, call them the gray-haired midgets. Now, listen, so I've consulted with some teams and they always say the same thing, Andre. They say, so what stats do you want, Harry, before you rock up? Because they want to do some in-game and practice work. And I always want to know one thing. I go, what stats do you think are important? Because it's going to really matter to me what they have been thinking all along, because I'm not going to change everything in the whole world. I just want to know what they've been fixated on. And one team told me the heat map. So I said, show me your heat map. And since that time, I've loved that idea. So I don't know if you guys remember the game in Dublin, Box, what was it, 2022 maybe? Close match. Ireland wins. And the heat map shows that there's nothing on the right side. Every single attack that Ireland built, and they always have big stats because they do a lot of rucks. They build more rucks than everyone else. And they pass more, but it's shorter. There was nothing. It was like 0 line breaks, 0 half breaks, not even denting the line on the right. And there was 2 on the left, which resulted in the tries that won the game for Ireland. And one of the ones that came from the heat map, so you see every single line and the frequency of that area. And so you start to see on the field where the Irish thought they had purchase, where they thought they could break the box. And none of that worked. It was fluke plays, Josh van der Fleer, hand in the rock, going out of bounds, being saved by someone else. And then the field, instead of being 40, it was forever wide. And that's the only time they came left. So I like the heat map to see the tendencies of a team, but I started to hate in-game stats because there's such a small sample size. So I like to see a season or 6 games or a trend, 4 games. So when I'm trying to come in with maul defense and fix something, I just go, I'm going to watch every single flipping maul you ever defended all year and every one that you built. And the decision-making when you were 2 meters, 3 meters in, when you went or you died with the maul. And I want to know who made the decision. So the stats are no use to me unless I know who made the decision. Was it 9 slapping the bum or was it the hooker? Which one went? And then we can start to fix a maul. And I promise you, if that decision-making is clear, and you think of the maul as a floating aircraft carrier of attack instead of the be-all and end-all, like does the maul get all the way there? It's not going to get there usually. It's going to get there 4 or 5 meters max. When do you peel off and when do you get advantage and how do you milk it? So that's another way with just going, getting more sample size. I think in rugby we forget how small that is. Third thing is halftime adjustments. I want to see how the shape of play changed from first to second half, because I think the teams that really win a lot, and this is why the Boks are doing this, in Ireland too, is they adapt better to the game right now because they have analytics that go back a long time, but then they see what's happening now and they're able to pivot. That redhead kid back in the box, coaching box, I don't know what his name is, really good. He's feeding information real time to Tony and to Jerry. And so I don't know what exactly he's looking at. I was trying to look in Murrayfield. I was climbing up there trying to see what he was doing, but they're very close. Kick space, teams that find they touch grass with their kicks. If you give me 6 or 7 times where I'm skidding a ball in the grass and I found the space, I like my chances on defeating, even if I'm bad on gain line. And then let's see, I think the rapidity, the frequency with which I make a break, so how many carries I've got to do to create a break, what the ratio between beating defenders, like bumping a tackler, and carries, because I think if you start doing that and you realize it only takes me 6 carries, specifically if a Jasper Wiese carries 6 times and he's going to bump off 2 guys, then I need to get him in his perfect spot. So just giving the ball, giving someone carries when it's not in their best area to carry, it doesn't really help much. I want Jack Dempsey to get the ball where he loves it, based on the tendencies that I've looked at for the whole season. Hopefully that's kind of an attack-minded set of stats, MV.
That was part 1 of this very special Lekker Rugby podcast with Harry Jones and André Pretorius. Coming up is part 2, where we discuss the state of affairs with the big 3 South African teams, the Stormers, the Bulls, and the Sharks. Make sure you don't miss it.